What's up, Taiwan? I'm Louise with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan has reported an increase in Chinese military activity near its borders. The military says it spotted 23 Chinese warplanes in the area, 8 of which breached Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, Taiwan's defensive buffer zone. The breaches come hours after a US warship passed through the Taiwan Strait on Wednesday morning. The Philippines says it doubts the authenticity of a leaked phone call apparently supporting Chinese claims of a deal between Beijing and Manila over the South China Sea. Philippine Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro Jr. was responding to a transcript published in Bloomberg and the Manila Times. It seems to show a Philippine admiral agreeing to operate fewer ships and to notify China of its South China Sea missions. Teodoro says the transcript could have easily been fabricated. Philippine officials say the leak is Beijing trying to distract attention from its aggressive actions. Disputes between the Philippines and China are heating up in the South China Sea, with Beijing frequently blasting water cannons at Filipino Coast Guard ships. For more on the tensions, Jaime Ocon spoke to Sherwin Ona, a Philippine security analyst in Manila.
So there have been a number of security developments regarding the Philippines and China, and I wanted to first touch on Balikatan 2024, this recent exercise involving the sinking of a warship. What's been the message that the Philippines is trying to convey to Beijing?
Well, first and foremost, we have forwarded a new defense policy, the Comprehensive Archipelagic Defense Concept. This Balikatan iteration is a demonstration of that policy shift. So it's not the first time that we did SyncX, but in this Balikatan iteration, we have seen a lot of live fire exercise, sinking exercise, at the same time, an increased tempo in our western border and our northern borders in the Batanes area, the area near Taiwan. So I think this is a strong message that the Philippines is dead serious when it comes to its shift in defense policy. And at the same time, well, on the military level, Balikatan is super helpful in terms of ensuring interoperability. So this is operation among allies, among our defense partners. But remember, in this iteration of Balikatan, the Coast Guard was also involved. It's the first time that the Philippine Coast Guard was involved, and so that would tell you that most probably the Philippines and its allies are thinking of this kind of action.
And one of the most visible disputes between the Philippines and China has been with their coast guards, with China blasting water cannons at the Philippines. I want to ask your thoughts on how the Philippines should be managing the situation, and should it be using its own water cannon?
I think we have to do what we have to do, right? I mean, we cannot renege on our responsibility to supply our outposts in Ayungin Shoal. But having said that, we have encountered, of course, some escalatory actions coming from the Chinese Coast Guard. There are many who are really agitated, especially here in the Philippines, and would like to see some retaliatory action coming from our end. But I think our President Marcos, has made it clear that we would not stoop down to that level. We don't want to lose our moral high ground at this point. And if you will just focus on the latest hosing incident, the Chinese Coast Guard ships hose ships from our fisheries agency that are doing humanitarian work. They're giving our fishermen supplies. They're aiding our fishermen. So this is a humanitarian mission. And then what do we get? We get a hosing response from the Chinese Coast Guard, aided by its militia arm.
That was reporter Jaime Ocon speaking to Sherwin Ona, a Philippine security analyst. A top US official has expressed concern over what would happen to the American economy if Taiwanese chip giant TSMC were to be taken over by China.
Could you very briefly describe for me what happens if China invades Taiwan and locks down the South China Sea to American commerce and takes over TSMC?
It would be absolutely devastating.
How devastating?
During testimony before a US House committee, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo declined to comment on how or when such an attack would happen. She said that 92% of the high-end chips purchased by the US are made by TSMC. Raimondo announced last month that the TSMC plant in Arizona would receive loans and subsidies exceeding $11 billion US. US President Joe Biden says his administration will not supply Israel with offensive weapons for its attack on Rafah.
If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem.
Biden says this is out of concern for civilian casualties in the city in southern Gaza. It's a major turning point in Biden's position on the conflict. Biden had previously been reluctant to withhold arms sales to Israel. The US will continue delivering defensive weapons. The move is likely to put pressure on Israel to cease or scale back its assault on Rafah, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have fled from other parts of Gaza. The remains of more victims of a devastating 2021 train crash in eastern Taiwan have been found. As John Van Trieste reports, the new discovery is taking a toll on the families of those killed in the accident.
3 years after a fatal train crash in eastern Taiwan, victims' families are still far from closure. Workers have just found more remains of victims, 11 this time, and relatives have traveled to the crash site yet again to collect them. On April 2nd, 2021, a flatbed truck slid onto the tracks that connect East Taiwan with the rest of the country. An oncoming train hit the truck at the entrance to a tunnel and derailed. 49 died and around 200 were injured, making it Taiwan's deadliest train wreck in decades. After workers found new remains in 2023, victims' relatives asked for a more thorough search of the crash site. But the fact that remains keep turning up has kept relatives' wounds fresh.
它本身就是一直在营运同城，进去也不是这么容易，心情就是既期待，但是又很纠结，但是又觉得很荒谬。
A lawyer representing victims' families is calling for new approaches to handling disasters of this scale to minimize relatives' pain.
对于这个各单位之间在灾害现场如何横向联络，而能够具体完成这些事项，要有一个沟通的模式。
The district prosecutor's office, whose staff accompanied family members to the crash site, has agreed to look into how to respond to future disasters.
我们在去年发生这个车厢内有这个疑似被害人遗骨的事件发生之后，那我们各单位也都责成尽速的去检讨后续遇到类似案件的一个搜证以及清理的作业流程。那我们会依照行政院会议所颁布的一个原则去要求督导相关的单位。
But as officials think about future disasters, the families of crash victims are still grappling with how to move on from the events of 2021. Delphine Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
4 people have been sentenced to prison over a fatal bridge collapse in eastern Taiwan. The Nanfang Ao Bridge collapsed in October 2019, killing 6 fishers. The Yilan District Court has determined the construction of the bridge in the 1990s did not follow approved plans and was poorly supervised. The sentences go up to 2 years. One of the accused plans to appeal their sentence, saying local officials failed to maintain the bridge properly. The proportion of Taiwan's exports going to China has fallen to its lowest level in more than 2 decades. Exports to China and Hong Kong in the first 4 months of the year dropped to $45 billion, or just over 30% of Taiwan's exports by value. This represents the lowest share of exports going to China since 2002, though China remains Taiwan's largest trading partner. The drop is attributed to a slowing Chinese economy and efforts to diversify away from the country. Meanwhile, Finance Ministry data shows Taiwan's overall exports grew 4% in April, the 6th month of consecutive growth. Taiwan's getting rid of its last COVID-era mask mandate. Starting May the 19th, hospitals and medical institutions will no longer require people to wear face masks, though they're still encouraged to do so. The measure started in December 2020. As geopolitical tensions in Asia rise, the effects of past conflicts, some going back decades, are still felt today. I travelled to the Pacific nation of the Solomon Islands, where remnants of World War II are still causing suffering. Long-time teacher Mavelyn Pitanoy is baking bread in her kitchen in the Solomon Islands to sell and as a therapy. Kneading the dough helps strengthen her muscles, torn in an explosion caused by a bomb left over from World War II. It was hidden in a garden and went off when she and her church group were cooking outside, killing 2 people and leaving Pitanoy with multiple injuries.
My left hand lacerated from the shoulder right up to my fingers. I lost 3 fingers, and this one was hanging low, leaving only the bones.
Pitanoy is one of an unknown number of Solomon Islanders who are killed or maimed each year by ordnance left over from World War II. This island of Guadalcanal was a key Pacific battleground then, where clashes between Allied and Japanese forces turned the course of the war against Japan. But that wartime legacy remains a reality for residents here today. Within a space of 10 years, Solomon Islanders have found 40,000 items of unexploded ordnance, 8,000 on this site alone when it was being cleared to build this stadium in the capital. Hundreds of thousands of unexploded ordnance are estimated to still be around. Most of it is American. Now, an NGO with funding from the US State Department is mapping former battlefield sites, looking for unexploded bombs and mortars, and attempting to create the Solomon Islands' first national survey of unexploded weapons.
It's not that surprising that there's this much left over. It was a very, very bloody campaign, and it was very intense and lasting almost a year. But where's all that ammunition going to go? What happens to it? And there was no serious cleanup.
The problem is set to get worse. As competition for housing and land grows, people are moving into new areas that were previously undisturbed, raising the risk of more accidental injuries, like Pitanoy's. Having left teaching, she still works to create educational materials, wanting to raise awareness of the dangers of unexploded ordnance.
Everybody must be aware that we in the Solomons, we are living on a ticking bomb. And they are around as a result of the World War, what they have left behind, what they didn't come back to clean up. And it's haunting us.
The bombs are from a conflict that ended before Pitanoy and most of her fellow Solomon Islanders were born. The suffering they are causing, a reminder that the wounds of war last long after the fighting ends. Videographer Klein Wong also worked on that report. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Before we sign off, some images of a mosque reopening in Istanbul, Turkey. It was converted from an ancient Orthodox church and is decorated with 14th century frescoes. I'm Louise Watt. Take care. We'll see you next time.